Here's a story from the Buddha, which I just love. A woman came to the Buddha. She had just lost her son. Her son had just died, young son. And she said, I want you to take this pain away from me. And he said, okay, I can do that, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to every house in the village and collect a pinch of salt from every household that has not experienced loss, right? You can imagine what happened. She came back empty-handed and she said, okay, I get it. I get it. I'm not alone.
Well, another day, another episode of Sacred Stories of the Spirit. It's lovely to have you here with me for another episode. Today is a gentle and powerful conversation about resilience, grief, and the way we continue to live, love, and create, even in the midst of profound loss. My guest is Joyce Sherry. She's a writer, coach, former actor and teacher, and an extraordinary well of wisdom. And in our conversation, Joyce shares how repeated loss has shaped her commitment to love, compassion, and presence, how storytelling can transform the personal into the universal, and the coaching tools she uses to help people slow down, reframe old stories, and find their sphere of influence. We're also talking about her debut novel, A Tale for the Shadows, a story of ghosts, vampires, cats, and lingering echoes of love. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Let's dive in. Well, Joyce, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me for a conversation today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Now, Joyce, you've had quite a journey and you're a well of knowledge about resilience. So can you tell me about some of the loss that you've experienced in your life?
Well, the first was my father when I was fairly young. I was thinking about it. I'm actually 15 years older now than my father ever got to be.
Wow.
So that's kind of, it impresses on me just how young he was when he died. Yeah.
Yes.
So my father, my mother, a few years after that, the expected grandparent and that kind of thing. My life partner died at 40, and my son was in a serious auto accident, leaving him without feeling or movement from the collarbones down. And he met this fabulous woman, and they had just gotten engaged when she was diagnosed with cancer and died about 5 months later. So there's been a lot.
Yes. Yes. And how has that shaped your approach to life?
I don't think it can help but shape someone's approach to life, right? I want to say the cliche, which is that it makes me remember that every day is a gift in a sense.
Yes, absolutely.
And that we want to value the time we have. It's never quite as long as we think it's going to be. And to try to make the most of it. I think the biggest ways is I am much more committed to just jumping into love.
Oh, beautiful.
It's I tell my kids I love them every day. I make sure my husband hears it every day at least.
Yes.
Once, that I show them as well as telling them.
Yes.
And to be bashful about committing to compassion and to love is really kind of a waste of time, as vulnerable as it might make us feel.
Amazing. And what about the moments of grief? I mean, I think as you've traversed these experiences, there would have been moments where it's been potentially overwhelming, but have you developed a toolkit to help navigate and reduce the overwhelm that you might feel in those moments of real pure grief?
For me, Jordan, a lot of that comes from, so I started my career as an actor, and we would always say seriously and jokingly when something hard would happen, I can use this someday. So I think in the moments of grief, and that would make us laugh and it would lighten the mood because it sounds so callous, right? I mean, you have to be conscious of just how callous that sounds. Well, that's okay because I can use it, And so that would make us laugh. And I think laughter is such an important thing, even in the midst of grief, if we can find something that does make us laugh. It's not disrespectful to the people who we've lost for us to find laughter, it reinforces our humanity. And so in the toughest parts of grief, in addition to doing that, I think about the people I don't believe. Well, here's a story from the Buddha, which I just love. A woman came to the Buddha. She had just lost her son. Her son had just died, young son. And she said, I want you to take this pain away from me. And he said, okay, I can do that, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to every house in the village and collect a pinch of salt from every household that has not experienced loss, right? You can imagine what happened. She came back empty-handed and she said, okay, I get it. I get it. I'm not alone. And I think remembering that we're not alone is so important because in moments of grief, I think, as you know, we feel so isolated. No one will ever understand. I'll never connect to people again. People won't want to be with me because I'm such a downer, right? And we discover that no, that the love
beautiful.
flows towards us. And in fact, we really are not alone.
That's really lovely. Thank you for that. Tell me about how you picked up the pen. When did you become a writer?
When I was 5, I wrote my first one-person show when I was 5 years old. It was a lot of, I was Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, Sleeping Beauty. There was a lot of pointing and, threatening of people. I performed it for my parents in their bedroom. So that was, I think I was born a storyteller.
Yeah.
And then when I've had several different careers in my life. And when I decided that I was going to leave teaching, which I'd been doing for several years, I said, now I'm going to have to put my fingers where my mouth has been for such a long time and start writing. And what naturally came out, who knew, was a story about death and love and the fact that love lingers after death. And that goes back to, I think, what we were talking about before a little bit, in that when we recognize that what we're experiencing is universal and personal, the act of writing takes the personal and makes it universal, and takes the universal and makes it personal. And so naturally, I just started writing a story, the kind of story that I would want to read, which happens to involve a ghost, a vampire, and a cat, because I love cats. And when it came time, when I finished that first story, and it was really ungainly, I had published it chapter by chapter by chapter to a series of folks who were reading it and enjoying it. And so when it came time to massage that into a novel, I realized here are the themes of this story, naturally enough, that it has to do with the fact that love lingers after death, both for those who are left behind and I think for those who have gone on. And, the love, to quote the Beatles, the love we make is deeper than the love we take. And it stays around in echoes with everyone that we've ever been in touch with.
Beautiful. And what is the process of writing for you? Do you find that do you feel like it's an intuitive process where you're accessing something bigger than yourself, or do you think it's an act of pure imagination where you are bringing to life the themes that you've always wanted to explore? How does it work for you?
I'm not sure those things are mutually exclusive, but when I started seriously full-time writing, I thought, wow, I understand where the concept of muses came from. Because I do think when you allow yourself, when you know your characters and you know the place that you're writing, the story comes from somewhere. And I'm not always sure where. And I think when we try to impose our agenda on it, we get into trouble.
Yes.
And in fact, my narrator at one point, the story is told in a frame, this novel is in a frame. And so there's a narrator who's telling the story akin to The Princess Bride to a young boy in a pediatric oncology ward, 17. And she says to him, stories have to be told in their own way. They like to tell themselves. And I have found that when I try to do something different, it all goes to hell in a handwagon. So
it's really interesting. And I know exactly what you mean as a writer as well. And it's interesting, isn't it? In that it's almost a challenge to be able to step back and let the story evolve in its own way and of its own accord. It's almost a feeling of who is the author, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I used to laugh at writers who would say, "Well, the character wanted this," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, sure, the character wanted that." But then as as I was writing plays and then writing this novel, I realized, oh no, that's very
It's a
true.
thing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
thing. So your stories deal with the supernatural. Do you have an opinion or a position on the role or the a definition of the supernatural? How does that play out in your life and how you connect with something bigger than daily life?
Oh, that's that's a deep question, Jordan. Yes, I do. I very much believe that there is an energy in the universe that propels us, that animates us, that connects us, and that is vastly greater than
Mm,
we are. I don't give it the name God because I think God has been co opted in some ways and
mm,
kind of turned into a divisive concept, which I think
mm,
is really, well, I don't think that's true
mm.
globally. I mean, certainly we see how religion plays out in the world and the wars that
Yeah.
it creates. But I do believe that, especially in the United States, it's become very divisive, the God that you
Mm,
believe in and whether you do and whether you don't. And it's
yes.
become a whole political mess and
Yes.
turmoil. So I've chosen not
Yes.
to ascribe that word and rather think of maybe um, a Buddhist concept of how we are all connected
Yes.
instead of that. Reassuring to me to have a sense that while we're not necessarily impelled, there is a guiding principle that brings us all, encourages us to be in life and
Yes.
to contact that universal wisdom and universal love and universal kindness that comes with just realizing we're not individually the be all and end all.
Well, I hope you're enjoying the second series of Sacred Stories of the Spirit. This season, conversations traverse change, identity, and belonging, and they ask us how to live with more integrity, more courage, and more connection, both to ourselves and each other. Together, we're looking at what it means to live story as practice, to let story guide our healing, our growth, and our understanding of what's possible in the day-to-day. Stay with us as we journey through the landscapes of courage, authenticity, and transformation. Now, let's talk about some of the people that you've collaborated with, Ray Bradbury being one of those. What was the most important lesson that you learned from him?
So Ray Bradbury, he wrote what he believed in. He wrote what mattered to him. And
Yes.
when that changed, it changed.
Yeah.
So, you can go to something like Dandelion Wine and you have this tender, gentle, humanistic spirit that is behind all of that. And, later in life, he wrote these very masculine, robust stories about charging around the world with John Huston. And he just wrote what he wrote. Do you know that the man could write faster than I can type? He
Wow.
could he could write a story just from his head so
Incredible.
quickly,
Yes.
and he was extraordinary. So he from himself. He didn't
Yeah.
try to follow a trend or follow the market or chase
Mhm.
somebody's idea of what he should be writing. He wrote what was true to him.
Yeah.
And I think that's essential. When we try to
Yeah.
chase the market, we're not going to be true to
Mhm.
ourselves. We're not going
Yes.
to say anything different or unusual. I mean, we might not when we write from ourselves either, but we have a better chance. And at least we'll have something that we're proud of.
Yeah.
So I think that was the most important thing.
Mhm.
Just write, write, and write and write and write and write because something will turn out to be
Yeah.
not bad.
Yeah. Nice. Now you also do coaching. What does the coaching landscape look like for you? What do you love about it?
I love connecting with people. I love hearing their stories and co-creating new ideas with them. I love how deeply wise and profound we all are when we just have space being held for us to find that. The world is so fast
Mm.
right now and has been for a while that I think the noise keeps us from accessing what we already know. And just being there and watching people have those moments of, what it's like when you say back to somebody just in slightly different words what they've just said, and they go, that's really good. And you're, yeah, because you just said it. And it just feels so wonderful.
Yes, amazing. And you talk about the sphere of influence a lot. Tell me about that. What does that mean, and why do we need to better understand that for ourselves?
Yeah, well, I'm speaking to my fellow desperate Americans in this way, but I
Mm.
think that it goes to everyone, everywhere. So when we think about the things that matter to us, we might have a large outside circle. And then you think about the things that really matter. What are the things that you care about so much that you would take action about
Mm.
them, right? And those are not the same. We can care about something and not take time to take action on it.
Yes.
But then we think about the things that we can take action that we want to take action on. And the sphere of influence is that smaller circle that is the things that we can actually affect
Mm.
change on. And of course, that starts with ourselves. We all know we can't change anybody but ourselves. So it starts there. But then we can start to think about, so I talk about my fellow desperate Americans. We have a fire hose every day directed at us of horror as we, watch our country becoming increasingly autocratic, right? So I have clients who come to me feeling just so overwhelmed.
Yes.
And so I love your deep breath there. Where can we start? Where we can start is, what are your priorities? And now what can you truly affect change on?
Mm.
And how do you take those actions? It's the only way that we can begin to order all the noise in our lives. So when we realize what our sphere of influence is, we can say, all right, well, I can
Mm.
at least write letters to my local papers. I can at least, if they exist
Yeah.
still in
Mm.
print form, I can at least call people who are hired to represent me in this country, my senators and my representative. If I can afford to, and philanthropy does not have to be on a large scale. It can
Mm.
be $5 to a cause
Yep.
you care about. And it's somehow taking action in the areas that you can influence. It's also about making sure, given that change is within ourselves and starts within ourselves, making sure that you're taking care of yourself. And we
Mm.
talk about self-care all the time, but what does that mean? And for
Mm.
different people, it's can be different. But I think all of us can benefit from moments of mindfulness
Yeah.
and settling and being in the world and going outside into nature and taking that in, whether it's a city park or your backyard, setting up a hummingbird feeder,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. Or if you're lucky enough to live by the ocean or by the mountains, and just getting out there and being in nature and realizing what's grander than we are.
Yeah. That's lovely. How do you help clients catch themselves in unhelpful stories? We talk about that a lot on the podcast in terms of old stories and emerging stories. But what's
Mm,
your process for working with people in that space?
yeah. Um, To start with, I use what is actually a compassionate communication technique,
Mm.
which is to ask yourself, so so often stories come from old patterns
Yes.
and old habits and the grooves that we've ingrained in our minds that help have us jump to a conclusion about something that's happened. And so I like to come back to the facts. What are the things that you can catch on an audio recording or a video recording? So those are the things that anybody could look at and say, yes, I see what you're talking about. I hear what you're talking about, and remove the interpretation from that. And then from that moment, we can start to reframe. So somebody said something to you that you feel was very hurtful. So what was the exact thing? What can you have caught on audio tape or videotape? Tape, showing my era, my decade. And from there, you can say, are there other interpretations? If you saw this in a movie, how might you interpret what was going on in that moment?
Yes.
And people will then create all kinds of different, maybe look at the other person with compassion and say, oh,
Mm.
a little objectivity, maybe that was where they were coming from.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't mean that. From there, you can start looking at is the story then that you were telling yourself about that. And where
Yes.
might that have come from?
Yes.
Now, as a coach, we don't go back into someone's deep childhood experiences, but we can start to look for patterns.
Yes.
And it's very important that the person themselves start to look for patterns. And if they can begin to get into the habit of stopping and saying, even after the moment, and it does take practice, right?
Mm.
So even after the moment, they say, here's what I can what I can see and what I can hear factually, then they can start getting into the habit of seeing that in the moment. And I love to start bringing up the hierarchy of needs. And after people have some practice, and again, that's something in compassionate communication, what need were you experiencing being unfulfilled? And what need was the person expressing, perhaps badly, perhaps not successfully, but
Yes.
what need was there?
Yes.
And we can start looking at it so much more objectively when we can do that for ourselves.
Yes.
And that is being compassionate to ourselves and giving ourselves
Yes.
a hug as well.
Yes, I love that. The thing that was going through my mind that is required here is time, isn't it? So this isn't
Yeah.
quick work. This is taking the time
No.
to slow down, really look at things and look at variations of interpretation and I think that's one of the biggest challenges I think we all have is that it's okay to take the time, we don't have to go as fast as we think we do.
Absolutely. In fact, it's vital to take the
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
it's not impossible to circle back with somebody, especially when that person is important to you,
Yes.
and say, wow, I was
Yes.
just thinking about our talk yesterday or
Yes.
whatever. And I thought about this, and can we revisit it?
Yeah. If you're new to Sacred Stories of the Spirit, you might like to go back and listen to Series 1 of the podcast, where the journey began. In this first series, we explore the transformative power of story and how the act of sharing, reflecting, and reframing our experiences can help us make sense of who we are. So if you haven't already, I invite you to take a listen, and hopefully you'll find something in each episode that's timeless, whether it's an insight, a question, or just a moment of recognition and reflection. Enjoy. If we talk about any advice that you might like to give to listeners, whether it's about moving through grief or moving through old stories, what would you say to people in terms of some top tips from Joyce Sherry as a coach?
I think one of the hardest tips, and you were just talking about the importance of time, it's going to take time. And you will wake up day after day after day feeling like you can't get out of bed, feeling like you're wondering if this is even worth it. And there will come a day you will wake up and you won't feel like that. And I
Right.
can't promise when it is. No one can, because it's very different for each of us. And there will come a day when you will actually laugh at something and you'll catch yourself and you'll wonder if that's okay. You'll wonder if it's all right not to hurt so badly. Is that being disrespectful or unloving to the person you've lost? Loss is not just a person. Loss can be a pet. It can be a job. It can be
Yes.
a sense of status or self or, our own relationship to ourselves.
Yes.
So there is a lot of grief, especially, as we're aging.
Yes.
There's a lot of grief around that as well. And you will come to that point and give yourself permission to laugh, give yourself permission to feel okay. And writing yourself a little permission slip is really an essential practice. You can write yourself a permission slip to feel terrible. You can write yourself a permission slip not to feel terrible. You don't have to be anything for anyone.
Mm. Yeah.
You don't have to shy away from telling the people who care about you, maybe not the supermarket checker, but the people who care about you, how you're feeling, honestly.
Yes.
And you can't avoid it. You can't escape it. Our human instinct is to try to find a way to escape and dull and to avoid the discomfort. And we find different ways to do that, whether, thinking you're going to drink and feel better tomorrow, or you're going to drown yourself in scrolling through social media, or whatever it might be. There's all kinds of ways to escape. And it's just going to be there to meet you when you're done with that, how you're feeling. So unfortunately, you kind of have to embrace it.
Yeah.
You have to welcome it in, knowing that you're strong enough to handle it and you will come through, because that's the human spirit. We come through.
Beautiful. I love that. And I particularly love the recognition that grief can be so many different things. We can grieve for things that we don't necessarily recognize as grieving. So for the things that we may have that have now dissipated, or a career that has changed, or
Exactly.
things that have passed. And I think even just recognizing that sense of things changing can bring about a sense of grieving for the old. I think the more that we can recognize that different things can cause us to grieve, the more that we can accept that we're going through a process and we can nourish ourselves through that process. I think that's a lovely way
Oh,
to think about it.
yeah, that's lovely, Jordan. I love the way you just put that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. And if you were to look back on your own journey and tell yourself something about resilience, creativity, and hope, what would you tell your younger self?
Things are going to get hard. You'll get through it. Turn to people you love. It doesn't have to be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be a lot of people. It doesn't have to be the world. There will be a small core that will always be there, she says, knowing that several people have died. But there will be that core
Yeah.
that's there, and you will find those people.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Hug your cat.
Yes, absolutely. Beautiful.
Yeah. Not sure she
Well,
would believe me, but I hope she does.
oh, I'm sure she will. I love that we can talk to our younger selves. And now, I think there's always ways to do that. So thank you so much. I've loved our conversation today, Joyce. It's been a real pleasure and such wisdom coming from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordan, for having me on your podcast. You're so easy to talk to.
Thank you. I love it.